Let me be straight with you. My brain is still stuck in 1984. That was the year. The last Shovelhead engine, the actual, honest-to-God final one, came off the line in York, Pennsylvania. And Harley, in their infinite wisdom, just buried it, rolled the Evolution motor in, and acted like the Shovelhead had never happened. For 42 years, that was the story. Case closed, end of the road. You'd find him at swap meets, sure, gathering dust next to crusty carburetor parts and faded leather mests. Or maybe your uncle had one propped up in his garage, swearing at it every Sunday while it leaked a puddle onto the concrete. A museum piece, a relic, a punchline almost. Well, somebody at Harley-Davidson clearly never got that "it's over" email. Or maybe they just ignored it, because the 2026 Shovelhead, it's real. It's sitting in showrooms right now. And I'll go ahead and say it, this might be the gutsiest move this company has made since 1936, when that very first knucklehead fired up and changed everything. Hold on though, I can already hear the eye rolling. Oh great, another retro cruiser with a fake gas cap and a part spin special, right? Just no. Bear with me here, because this isn't Harley dusting off an old badge, slapping it on a heritage classic, and calling it a day. That would have been the easy route, the cynical route. What they've actually done is resurrect an engine architecture, a whole damn engine family that hasn't powered a factory bike since Ronald Reagan was still in his first term. And the way they pulled it off, it's genuinely clever engineering under the hood with a sneaky layer of marketing genius on top. We're going to dig into all of it, why the old-timers who've been screaming for something with real character might finally shut up, and why the guys who actually remember wrenching on the original Shovelhead might want to grab a seat before we go any further. Let's address the obvious, the proverbial elephant in the garage, if you will. The original Shovelhead ran from 66 to 84, and it got its name because, well, those rocker covers looked exactly like an upside-down coal shovel. But it also had a reputation, a well-earned one, for marking its territory like a dog with a bladder problem. We're talking a quart every 500 miles in its worst years. And here's the thing, most of that wasn't even the engine's fault. It was the AMF era. Quality control was a suggestion, tolerances were loose enough to drive a truck through, and if your bike got built on a good Tuesday, that thing would run forever. But if it rolled down the line on a rushed Friday afternoon, good luck. You'd be mopping oil off your garage floor by Saturday morning. The bones were always solid. The execution, well, sometimes it left a lot to be desired. So what if, and here's the question Harley's engineers apparently ask themselves, what if we kept those solid bones and fixed everything else? That's the 2026 Shovelhead in a nutshell. Same unmistakable silhouette, same shovel-shaped rocker covers that made this motor an icon of 70s counterculture, of biker movies, of that whole outlaw mystique, but underneath that nostalgic shell, it's a thoroughly modern, fuel-injected, oil-tight power plant. The guys who built these things in the AMF days would weep with envy if they saw what's inside now. Quick pause, because I know exactly what some of you are thinking. So it's just a Milwaukee 8 in a costume. And look, you're not totally wrong. You're not entirely right either. But calling this just a costume is like saying a tailored suit is just fabric. The details matter here, and Harley leaned into them hard. Displacement first, because this is where it gets fun. The 2026 Shovelhead displaces 1923 cc's. That's 117 cubic inches if you speak old school. Built on a thoroughly beefed-up version of Harley's current Milwaukee 8 architecture. Compare that to the original 74 and later 80-inch motors, and you can see the through line. More displacement solves problems has been Harley's signature move for 60 years, and that hasn't changed. But what has changed is what's happening inside the cases. Hydraulic, self-adjusting lifters mean nobody's crawling under their bike to do valve lash every 2,500 miles anymore. A modern oiling system, finally, blessedly, actually returns oil to where it's supposed to go instead of pooling in the heads and smoking out the exhaust like a vintage Shovelhead on a July afternoon. And fuel injection? The original never lived to see it. Now, cold starts don't require a small prayer and a kick that could throw your back out. Now picture this, because I promised you a pattern interrupt. It's 1979. You're a Harley engineer. Somebody walks up to you and tells you that one day your engine will start with a thumb button and a phone app. You'd probably laugh, throw a wrench at them, go back to fighting with your Tillotson carburetor. Different times, my friends. Different times. Output, we're looking at around 165 horsepower and roughly 145 pound-feet of torque, depending on which trim you go with. Numbers that would have been absolutely unthinkable for a big twin back in the Shovelhead's original era, when 60 to 66 horsepower was considered pretty respectable. This thing doesn't just look like a callback. It rides like a modern performance cruiser that happens to be wearing a vintage costume to a very convincing party. And Harley didn't stop at the engine. The frame is a reinforced soft-tail chassis, that hidden rear shock setup that gives you the hardtail look without making your spine pay for it every time you hit a bump. Wheelbase lands around 64 inches, keeping that low, long, stretched-out stance that chopper culture fell in love with back when Peter Fonda was cruising across America on the big screen. Seat height? Low. Confident. Mid-26-inch range unladen, so shorter riders aren't standing on their tiptoes at every stoplight like they're trying to impress someone. Visually, the design team earned their money on this one. The fuel tank is shaped with that rounded vintage profile, finished in deep paint that looks almost wet. Think vivid black or a deep ox blood that's been aged in a whiskey barrel. Exhaust is a 2-into-1 setup, tuned to growl instead of scream, because Harley knows exactly what their customers want to hear when they twist the throttle. And those rocker covers, the actual shovel-shaped rocker covers that started this whole legend, they're back. Satin chrome finish that catches light from every angle. The detail nerds are going to obsess over these at bike meets, and Harley knows it. Here's something you probably didn't expect. A price tag. Word out of Milwaukee has the Shovelhead starting around $22,500 MSRP before destination charges and the usual dealer add-ons. It's a deliberate spot in the lineup. Harley isn't trying to make this the cheapest softail on the floor. They're making it the one with the most story behind the price. And that raises a real question. One I want you to sit with for a second. Is nostalgia worth a premium? Because that's really what you're buying here. You're not chasing horsepower per dollar efficiency. You're buying a piece of motorcycle mythology, resurrected and modernized with a name that means something to anyone who's spent time around classic American iron. For some riders, that's worth every extra penny. For others, it's a marketing exercise wrapped in chrome. Now, I gotta be straight with you, because something about this whole story doesn't quite add up, and we'll get to that in a minute. But first, who is this bike actually for? That's where the real debate is playing out online right now. If you're a long-time Harley rider, you've owned a Shovelhead, an Evolution, a Twin Cam, and you've spent decades listening to your buddies moan about how they don't build them like they used to, this bike is basically Harley raising their hand and saying, okay, fine, we'll build them like we used to, just without the oil leaks and the kickstart drama. If you're a younger rider who's only ever known modern cruisers, ride modes, traction control, all that stuff, this is your entry point into 60 years of design language, without having to actually learn carburetor tuning, God forbid. But if you're a purist, and I mean a real dyed-in leather numbers-matching purist, there's a sticking point here. And honestly, it should bother you, because no matter how good the styling is, no matter how clever those rocker cover toolings look, this is fundamentally a Milwaukee 8 wearing a Shovelhead costume to a very, very convincing party. The bottom end, the oiling architecture, the fuel delivery, none of it is actually a reproduction of 1966 engineering. It's a modern engine cosplaying as history. Depending on who you ask, that's either brilliant design philosophy or it's exactly the kind of badge engineering complaint people have had about Harley reissuing old model names for the last 20 years. So which one is it? Brilliant homage or expensive cosplay? Stick around, because by the end of this video, trust me, you're going to have a very different answer to that question than the one you're forming now, and it's probably not the answer you're expecting. Let's zoom out for a second, because there's a bigger strategy at play here than just one model. The motorcycle industry spent the last few years trying to chase two very different audiences at the exact same time. Younger riders who want smaller, lighter, more affordable bikes, and legacy riders who want big, heavy, chrome, and thunder Americana. The Shovelhead name is Harley reaching directly into that second group's nostalgia and pulling hard. It's not subtle. It's not supposed to be subtle. When you name a motorcycle after an engine that's been dead for over 40 years, you're not whispering to your customer base. You're shouting, probably through a megaphone, while revving the engine. And look, say what you will about the strategy, it's working as a conversation starter. Forums are on fire. Comment sections are a mess. Dealer floors are buzzing. Everybody's got an opinion on whether this thing deserves the name on its tank. That's exactly the reaction a legacy brand wants when it's trying to remind the world it still has stories worth telling. But here's the twist, the thing that's been nagging at me through this entire breakdown, the thing that should have been nagging at you too, is just how convenient all of this is. A perfectly resurrected legendary nameplate, a price point slotted exactly where it needs to be, specs that read like a wish list assembled from every complaint riders have had about the original engine for 40 years. Doesn't that feel a little too clean? A little too on the nose for a company simply reviving an old batch? Yeah, it does, because it is. The 2026 Harley-Davidson Shovelhead doesn't exist. Not yet anyway. Maybe never ever. Everything you just read, the specs, the pricing, the styling details, it was all a concept build, a what-if thought experiment, imagining how Harley would bring this legendary name back if they decided to do it tomorrow, grounded in real engineering trends, real platform architecture, and real pricing logic from their current lineup.